Hello and welcome to the Gillstrat channel. My name is JB, and in today's video I want to give you a tour of my shelf layout. I know I made a video a couple years ago with like a locomotive point of view, but I didn't really go over how I built it or why I made the choices I made and how I designed it. So this is going to be an unscripted video where I'm just going to go through and show you how I built it. Hopefully it'll give you some ideas if you're interested in building a shelf layout like I did, and hopefully give you some good pointers. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. All right, so let's first thing is let's take a look at the quote-unquote bench work, or how I built the shelf here. So if you look at this, basically one of my main goals for this shelf layout was to minimize the amount of spots that I actually connected it into the wall. So I am in a rented apartment, and when I moved in, I asked multiple times if I was allowed to build shelves, if I was allowed to screw those to the wall. And they said, yes, you could do that. Just keep the hole small and make it so that it is something that you can just fill in with some putty when you move out, and then, they'll paint it over. So that was actually one of the goals here. But yeah, you can see here, if you look, you can see these little black screws. These are the spots where it connects into the wall. And it's been a little while, but if I remember right, I think this is held in with around 25 screws. So this entire setup is only connected to the wall with 25 screws. So if you look here, so you can see the black screws. So those are, I believe they're 1.5 to 2 inch screws. And we did use a stud finder, so they are all going into studs to make sure that they're really solid and can hold the weight of this. But you can see all these little cross member supports here. These are actually screwed in from behind. So what we did, and that's why I have this board here, is it acts as two purposes. One, it's a support board. It's kind of like an I-beam that keeps the shelf up. And it also is where I put all these little bracket supports. So these are actually screwed in from the back side into here. And I did this because I didn't want all of these supports being screwed directly into the wall. So you can see I have all these supports, but that allows me to minimize the amount of screws that I have to put into the wall. The other thing too, and if we'll go back around here to my other side. So this here, I kind of refer to this part of the layout as the bridge, because I actually have this huge gap that I have to bridge with the layout. So here are these beams here. These are actually acting as a support. So this is kind of like the I-beam that holds up the layout. So if we go here, you can see that, yeah, this piece of wood goes all the way from this wall all the way to here. And that is what supports the weight of the layout here. And you can see I actually have a train stopped right there. I got my Streamline K4. And at the end of the video, we'll get them running so you can see how that goes. So that is basically the bench work for this. Basically what I did is I believe these are 4x1s. If I remember right, these are pine. I built this layout, I want to say, on a budget around $600 to $700. And actually most of that went into track, and I will talk about that as well. And so I ended up going with the less expensive wood. So far it's held up. This thing has been in existence for about 3.5 years now. The wood has colored a little bit as it's aged. I never bothered painting it. Honestly, I kind of like this wood color feel. I don't know, it just gives it kind of a homey feel. But yeah, so these are, I believe these here are 1x4s. I think this is a 3x1, this one right here. And the layout itself is built onto these 6x1s. So these are 6x1s. And I believe, yeah, these 3x4s, I use those to make these brackets here. So we cut those out. So you can see that's kind of how the bench work was made. My dad and I actually built this over a weekend. It took us about 3 days to build it. It took a day and a half to get the woodwork up, And then the second major feature of the construction here are these basically these plastic, I don't know if you call them guardrails or protectors. So these are made out of PET plastic, the same stuff that they make water bottles out of, or soda bottles. And the reason I use that is because it was the most affordable. I was able to get, I believe it was like a 3x3 sheet of these. I got 3 of them. I don't remember the exact price, but it was really the only reasonable material I could find. You know, some people say use acrylic. That's a lot more expensive. This part, actually, these things, these little guardrail things, they were probably one of the most difficult and annoying things to build or to make, because I had to cut these out. I had to cut these strips out. So these are about, if I remember right, these are about 2 inches. And I did not have the proper tools to do this. Like, I didn't have like a bench saw. So I basically used a pair of like those like heavy duty like metal snipper cutter things. And that was a huge pain. You can see they're not perfectly level. In fact, some spots are pretty gouged out. And you can even see where there's like slivers and shavings here that just, you know, they've been that way for a while. And I basically what I did, I cut them. I went, measured out 2-inch strips, cut them with these snips. That took forever. I spent probably an entire day just cutting these out. And then I sanded them to try to smooth them out as much as I could. Some came out pretty good, like this piece here. You can see it's pretty smooth, although this might have been the edge. I'm thinking, yeah, this is probably the edge here of that actual piece of plastic, because this is very flat and smooth. And here you can see it's kind of a little bit jagged. So this, what I did, and then what I did is basically, as you can see, there's these little silver screws. I want to say those are probably 1-inch screws. And I basically went in and drilled and screwed these in. And of course, the reason I did this is because this is a shelf layout that's up by my ceiling, and I don't want any of my train equipment to derail and fall off to the ground and get destroyed. I learned my lesson on my first layout when I had track running pretty much on the edge of my board, and trains would occasionally fall off, hit the hard cement floor of the basement, and be completely destroyed. So I learned that you do want to have some type of guardrail. I wanted to make it clear, because especially when you're looking at it from the angle at the floor, or like maybe when I'm sitting on my couch, you know, you don't want something blocking the view of the train. So when I built it, I kind of played around with it, and I can show you here. Let's step up. I actually did a test where I would just tip the cars over like that, and to see like about how much height I needed. And so it's designed so it's low enough that you can still see, but it's tall enough that if the train were to completely derail and fall over, it will not fall off the edge of the shelf. Another design construction or design choice here is, you notice in the corners where I go around the curves, I'm not really following the track, and that really just came down to simplicity. We could have spent a bunch of time trying to cut out a nice curved piece, but I didn't really have the equipment for doing that. And like I said, this was like, I had a weekend to build this, and that was it. And so we went with the quick, easy fix, which was to buy these 12x1s, which was the widest piece of pine that I could get. And as you can see, it basically goes to the very edge on that side. So we kind of measured it out, and it just kind of fits perfectly here. But it has made, as you can see, I basically can now use this as kind of like a storage spot. So I do leave stuff up on here. You can see I got a locomotive and some cabooses set up there. And so that's kind of nice, but it does kind of make the train disappear when it goes into the corners, which, I don't know, it's kind of neat though, like having it disappear and then come back out once it's made the turn. So that's pretty cool there. So now let's talk a little bit about the electrical. You probably notice I do have Christmas lights hanging down. This kind of is an homage back to first train layout, which I'm pretty sure they show up in some of those videos. But I actually strung some Christmas lights up in my train room way back when I was in high school. And I left them up. And actually, originally, those were the exact same lights that I strung up here. You can see I just used paper clips, the heavy-duty binder paper clips to just hold them up. But eventually they burned out, so I replaced them with these LED ones. They do create a nice ambience in here because this is like our family room. So next I want to show you basically my electrical setup, how this whole thing is powered. So this is my command power station here for the layout. It's pretty simple. You can see I have my old DCS51 from Digitrax powering this whole thing. This thing is rated at 3 amps, and I've never had any issues with it. I mean, I'm really only running 2 trains at a time, but it's plenty of power. And then I do have the LNWI plugged into this, so I can use the controller. Way back when I was in Japan, I actually purchased a TCS, I think it was with the UT100, which was their universal Wi-Fi throttle. So I have been using that. I actually, I'll probably make another video about it, but I actually am going to be changing this out to the UR93 so I can use Digitrax's new DT602D throttle. So hopefully I'll make a video about that and kind of talk about that. But you can see pretty much I just have my bus coming in here in the back. Got power. This is actually a recent thing I did, but I actually went in and I put this power strip in here so I can just have an on and off switch. Otherwise I used to just have to plug and unplug this into this little socket here, and I just kind of got tired of doing that. So now I can just flip a switch and the whole thing turns on, and I just have everything zip tied and screwed in, so it's all nice and neat. You know, some good cable management. And you can see I also have our wireless router sitting there as well. It's a good spot for it, I guess. A shelf kind of up here on the wall. So that is the system I am using to power this layout, and it works great. And I did build a power bus, so I'll show you that in just a second here. Down from my actual command power station for the layout, I do have my test track and program track. I am using my DCS 50K I bought in Japan, and I also have the PR4 that I bought in Japan, brought that back. I'm basically using that as a connection to my computer, and I'm actually doing all the programming through here. So this is basically electrical. So let's go ahead and I'll show you how I create a bus for this. As you can see here, I do have this cable coming out hidden by this picture, and then it snakes up and goes up into the layout. Alright, so then you can see it comes up through that hole there in the corner. Basically those are just screws with some washers that I screwed into the board, and that's acting as my distribution connector. So you can see that I have several cables coming here. So I have the one coming up from the command power station there, the command power booster, and then I have 2 large wires. I believe this is 14 gauge, and I believe I'm using, I want to say 22 for the feeders, so that's the smaller wire. And then what I did is I just have this wire running along the back. So if you watch the video I made with the locomotive point of view, you'll see this wire just running all the way around, and that just goes all the way around. And basically in every corner I have these junctions where I bring in feeders. So if I go back here, you can see I have these feeder wires that are coming off of there, and they're coming in, well, they're covered up by the train now, but you can see right there, I soldered them into the track. I made my own solder reel joiners because they were really pricey, so I just took some reel joiners and soldered the wires to it. And then I'll show you a different spot, I think comes out better. I actually cut a groove in here so the wires can go under the track without having to bump up. So that's basically how I did it. And then I just did this in every corner. So you can see here I have another junction here. So once again, I'm just using the crimping tool. Those are just screws with some washers screwed right into the wood. You know, we're dealing with pretty low voltage here, 14 volts, so you don't need to worry about that damaging the wood or being a fire risk or anything. And then, yeah, you can see here I basically cut out a little groove there so the wires can go underneath. and then they are just directly soldered onto some rail joiners. So, and then you can see the power bus continues, and then we have the other corner. The power bus comes into this corner here, and same thing, we got the connectors into some screws and going to these feeders here. And then lastly, it keeps going all the way across the bridge into that corner. And then here's the last corner here where you can see I have the connectors coming in just with the screw with the washer there into the board, and that distributes power to these feeders that are then soldered onto the rails on the track, which you can't really see because there's a train here blocking it. But that kind of segues into the next feature of this layout, which is that it is built completely out of Bachmann Easy Track. One of the main goals for this layout was to make it semi-permanent. As I said, this is an apartment. I've been here for several years now, but being it's an apartment, there's a good chance we'll be moving sooner or later. And so I wanted to build a layout that was not super permanent. And so that was one of the reasons why I chose to go with the Bachmann Easy Track. Now that decision had some pluses and minuses. The plus is it really did make the track work real easy because I didn't have to worry about nailing anything down or gluing road bed or anything like that. It was literally just snap it together, and it literally is just sitting here. None of this is attached to the wood in any way or form. It is literally just sitting here. So it'd be really easy for me to just take it up, disconnect it all, pack it up, and move when the time comes. But there were two caveats, or two maybe trade-offs, probably the better word for that. One of them is that because it's on the plastic road bed, it's hollow, it does make a lot of noise. One suggestion that had been made to me when I was building this was to just put felt down, and that probably would do a great job of muffling the noise. But like I said earlier, I was on a budget when I built this, and I also was kind of running out of time, and so I just didn't do that. And at this point now, to lift the track up and put felt, it's just a lot of work, and I just not really have the time for doing that right now. So it is a little noisy, especially if you want to have trains just kind of run in the background while you're watching TV or something. You kind of have to run them slow or they make a lot of noise. And then the other thing was, it was expensive, especially here. So here you can see I'm actually showing you the crossover. These are the only turnouts on this layout. And these are actually the ones with the built-in DCC accessory switch. So all these turnouts here are powered off of the DC track. The power just coming into the track, and then you can program them so that they can be controlled by your DCC system. And these, if I remember right, and I got these online, I want to say I paid around $75, $80 for each of them. And there's two here. There's a left one and a right one. And they were pretty expensive. In fact, like I said earlier, the most expensive part of building this layout was the track. And I actually got a really good deal on this track. So there's a hardware store near me that has a hobby department, and I didn't know it at the time, but they were actually trying to get out of trains. And they've expanded their RC and stuff. I feel like all the hobby shops near me are really into RC, but not so much into trains. Anyway, I didn't know at the time. I went in there, picked out a lot of pieces of track, and the guy there rung me up, and as I was leaving, I noticed that there were some pieces that were not on the receipt. So I went back and said, hey, I think you missed scanning some stuff. He's like, no. I was like, I'm giving you a really good deal. And then I came back a month later and all their train stuff was gone. So my guess is they saw me as an opportunity to get rid of some of their stock, and that's what they did. But I did have to order these turnouts online, and I did have to, because they were trying to get rid of stuff, they really weren't super stocked on everything. They had a lot of this long 3-foot straight pieces, but the curves here, these are the widest curves that Bachmann makes, and I had to order these online because they didn't have those. But all the straight pieces, all that came from there. And I want to say combined, I spent probably around $300 to $400 on track. Alright, so now that I've given you guys a quick tour, let's go ahead and run some trains here. So I got my H10 here pulling a freight train, and I got my K4S here pulling a short passenger train. So the H10 is running on the, I guess, inside tracks. That's the one closest to the edge here, so you can see it pretty well. And you know, the plastic railing there makes it so you can see the locomotive pretty well. Then the K4S is running on the inside track. So that one, when you're standing, you can see it pretty well, but the wheels are cut off a little bit. But otherwise, it still shows up pretty good, and you can still enjoy watching it run. Even when you're sitting, if it's across from you on the other side of the room, you can still see it. That's my layout in a nutshell there. So hope this video gives you some ideas if you're thinking of building a shelf layout. I will include in the description a link to the SCARM file for this layout if you want to take a look at that. But thanks for watching, and hope to see you in the next video.